Welcome everyone to our RIF Expert Panel. Thank you for joining. Today we'll be focusing on the topic of blockchain oracles. What are they and why do we need them? The goal of this expert panel series is to educate our community on different topics in the blockchain space. Also to provide a platform for experts to share their different ideas and opinions on certain contested issues. And rather than just sharing with you the perspectives of RIF and RSK teams, we believe the best way to promote learning and collaboration in the space is to invite leading experts, as yourself, to tell us what they have been up to in their work and how they have analyzed and overcome certain issues. Now, I'd like to introduce you to today's panel speakers and Oracle experts. We have Nicholas Fett, the CTO of Tellor, Julian Rodriguez, the PO for RIF Gateways, Joe Roets, the CEO of Dragonchain, and Vigna, the CEO of Vulcan. Now, if you like to give a short introduction of yourself and the work you are doing on oracles, we can go again in the same alphabetical order. Nicholas, Julian, Joe, and Leo. Nicholas, please, if you want.
Sure. First off, thanks for having me. But I am Nick Fett. I am the CTO of Tellor. Tellor is a decentralized oracle on the Ethereum network. The way that we work is we have a network of staked miners that compete at a proof of work challenge to provide DeFi information. Basically, we provide currency prices for DeFi applications on top of Ethereum. Before that, I'm actually an economist by training, worked for the federal government here in the US, namely the CFTC, so the regulator for financial products, and then was doing a derivative startup as an Ethereum Foundation grantee before I kicked off Tellor full-time back a little over a year ago. So that's me.
Thank you, Nick. Julian, you're next.
Hello, my name is Julian Rodriguez. As Raúl mentioned, I am the product owner of RIF Gateways. In RIF Gateways, basically, what we are building is a unified layer for consumption of different Oracle services. So the idea is to integrate leverage on the existing protocols and create a unified layer for consumption. Mainly, we're starting with the RSK blockchain. And the idea is to integrate all these available protocols that are in the space and make it easy for users to consume them and subscribe to different oracles in different payment or subscription models.
Okay. Now, Joe, you can continue.
Okay. Hello. I'm Joe Roets. I've been a software architect for over 25 years and got into blockchain in 2010. Went back and forth a bunch of different startups and ended up at Disney building a private blockchain platform that we open sourced and made a company out of it, Dragonchain. And so that was 2014, 2016 released, 2017 commercialized. And we've been building a lot of interesting things, and we touch upon Oracle space a little bit, including with a lot of interop focus. So we're primarily focused on scaled and secure enterprise or actual business applications of blockchain and everything in the ecosystem.
Thank you. Leo, you can continue.
Hello, everyone. I'm Leo. I'm a CEO of Vulcan. We're a Chainlink node operator, so we've been contributing to a lot of the reference data feeds from the Chainlink Oracle protocol. And currently, in addition to running our Oracle nodes, we're focused on building platforms that highlight the diversity of existing Oracle protocols. So our website feeds.link is looking to basically aggregate a bunch of protocols. So we currently have Chainlink, but we're also going to be adding Tellor. And the plan is to basically highlight the diversity of Oracle solutions to see which best fits which use case. And yeah, we've been running for 2 months now, and that's why we're interested in learning about all the variety of oracles beyond just the ones we're currently participating in.
Thank you, Leo. I'll introduce myself. My name is Raúl Laprida. I'm a senior researcher at IOVLabs. I'm actually the author of the RIF Gateways white paper, the product that Julian is leading. Now we'll move on to the questions. The first one is not addressed to one in particular. It's a general question. Why are oracles required? Please, whoever wants to start, go ahead. If not, I can ask.
I can do it if you want. Generally, get the external data, real world data onto chain, right, and or between chains and or to the users from the chain. So wide.
Yeah, I think that sums it up pretty well. In a few words. Adding external data is all what Oracles is about, because these, for people who aren't familiar with blockchains, whether it's a transactional blockchain like Bitcoin or more computational state machine like Ethereum, these protocols initially are kind of isolated from the real world. So you can't just make like an HTTP request and ask what the weather is or what's the price of Ethereum or any other crypto. So with these oracles, we fetch external data and we write it on chain through through our transaction. So we pay the gas fee, but we get compensated for writing that data on chain. And then other dApps use this data for a multitude of use cases.
Thank you. Yeah, and so data can be consumed opportunistically, right, in the blockchain. The next question, I'll address it to Julian first. So how can oracles propel the new Web 3.0, which is the approach you're having to Web 3 and blockchain-based oracle services on each of your projects, in this case, RIF Gateways?
Okay. Yeah, as I mentioned before, basically in RIF Gateways, at this point, we're not building our own protocol. We're trying to leverage on what is existing, mainly on the Ethereum space, and try to bring those into the RSK blockchain. So we're working now currently with Chainlink. We're also integrated Probable and other protocols. And the idea is to build, as I mentioned, a unified layer for consumption that allows users to first browse all the different available oracles that are in the feeds that are available, and basically subscribe in a very easy and intuitive fashion. Because one of the complexities that we see in this space is that for integrating each oracle, you need to sort of understand a bit how it's implemented, and I mean, we believe that we want to provide a simplified experience. So that's how we are tackling. I mean, regarding how oracles propel the Web3, I think as it was mentioned before, oracles are a big part of blockchain and decentralized applications. I think that it's very easy to imagine like very impactful use cases or scenarios where you can work in an isolated way and not have to access any information from the external world, whether it is an exchange rate for a financial application or any event for any type of insurance or other type of applications. So this is I'm glad we're having this talk, because oracles it's a crucial part, and also it's an area that is still under development. There's still a lot to do in this space.
Yeah, if I could add to that, I see it as someone who's focused on not really designing protocols, but more running nodes that add data to these Oracle protocols. I see oracles as part of a kind of a trifecta of the future of the Web3 dApps that are aiming to have the Web3 decentralization, but with the Web 2 user experience, the fluidity. And so with layer 2 scaling solutions, meta transactions that are like feeless for users, and oracles, you kind of have the tooling that enables the creation of various types of dApps that could not exist beforehand on blockchains. You get the external data, you get meta transactions where the dApp can pay for their users' fees, and you also get the scalability that comes with layer 2 scalability solutions, where we've seen a lot of research on the Ethereum side. So with the data, the scalability, and the feelless user experience, I think we're going to be able to see the advent of dApps that feel like a regular website, but also have the guarantees and the security of the blockchain. I don't know. That's the long-term vision that excites me the most in this space.
Thank you. Anyone wants to add something to the question? If not, we can move to the next one.
I can say I think also economy should be brought up. It might not be the easiest way to explain it in this question. There are a couple other questions that are coming up that I think might be more closely tuned to that. But when you get into that, I mean, you have the user experience side of things, but then also the decentralization itself. You need an economy, which is oracles are key. Blockchain itself is key to that.
Thank you. Well, then we can move to the next question. I'll start with Leo. How can we ensure trust and avoid oracles being compromised?
Yes. So I think this is a problem that hasn't been perfectly solved. The Sybil attack, but we've seen different types of solutions. So, for example, Tellor is using proof of work, where each oracle has to do a certain amount of work. With Chainlink, the main point of decentralization comes from the aggregation of various data providers. So various oracle operators such as Vulcan Link and others each provide data, and we take the median. But for example, there still remains a challenge where, even though the data is written in a decentralized manner, we also need to make sure that the APIs that people use are decentralized. So for example, if 20 Oracle operators all use the Coinbase API, then that data isn't really decentralized, because we're all using the same backend API. So I think in the future, we're going to need to see probably a signed data provider. So, for example, Coinbase started with their signed data feed. If multiple exchanges had that option, this would enable better decentralization and also proving the source of that data. So as an Oracle operator, we could prove that we've taken this data from this website and not just come up with a random number. So those are things I'm interested in seeing like provable centralized data that then gets written in a decentralized manner. I don't know if you have any other ideas.
Yeah, but if I can chime in, I think those are almost two separate problems. There's, I always say there's like the first is the Oracle problem, as far as like, okay, well, how do you get any off-chain data on-chain and move it there? And then the second question is, okay, well, what is the data? So they're kind of separate as far as, the first piece in getting data on-chain and how do you make sure that it isn't compromised. I think we sort of know how blockchains secure data. So like, how do you in a decentralized fashion come up with a consensus mechanism to secure what a database is? And that's like, well, you need a blockchain. It's like what all of us would say. And, it's just the only problem with oracles is that now, instead of just specifying, okay, it's only for this limited set of, we're only doing these transactions and these functions, now it's everything. And you have to have a way to come to consensus on everything. And that's how it's a little bit more difficult. And a lot of the problem statements, you especially if you look back at like the 2017 Oracle designs or things like that, you looked at them and you're like, man, if they actually solve this, they solve scaling and they solve connecting blockchains and so much more. And, none of them really ever took off because they didn't. The Oracle problem is really hard to solve from those perspectives. And then moving on to the data piece that Leo was talking about, I think the way that we at Tellor look at it, there's two kind of separate problems. Like, if you look at like, we want the price of Bitcoin on Ethereum. There's the price of Bitcoin. There's the price of Bitcoin on Coinbase. There's the price of Bitcoin that somebody's willing to buy from you right now for $1,000, or there's a price of Bitcoin from multiple exchanges. They're all different numbers, and there's different reasons you would want different ones. Because the problem is, if you're just getting it, say, from Coinbase, of course, Coinbase themselves providing it would be the best, but the problem is that now Coinbase can not provide it for you, and they can censor it. But if you want, something that's like truly censorship resistant, maybe you just want to know more of the price of Bitcoin according to a bunch of people. So it's almost a different kind of different use cases require different pieces of data. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think it can, at least the way I see it is there are two things that can be done. One is decentralization really helps, not only in terms of the sources, not just depending on a single point of truth, but also having the centralized nodes or different processes looking at the information and also getting it from different sources. That's one, the decentralization. The other one is try to work on more authenticity proofs. So like there are mechanisms where you can ensure which is the actual code that is running, that value that you are retrieving really belongs to that site, that it wasn't tampered during the transfer. So there are things like in Intel, I believe it's SGX and things like that, where you can sort of ensure that the oracle's running like trusted environments and with public code that it's controlled, and that also helps to bring transparency. Right.
I think it's identity and economy, because and a lot of what we do, and we're not purely an Oracle services company, so what we do has a lot to do with when you're in an enterprise, having a spectrum of trust where I can trust my own data entirely. I can trust the data of a business partner pretty well. And when it gets further and further out, decentralized, then I need more and more measurable proof because I don't have a contract with them. I don't know them. And we like to make things available at any point in that spectrum because there are different use cases and business use cases for those different levels of trust. And when you're talking about an Oracle, in some cases you don't need a fully decentralized Oracle because it's coming from a trusted source, like what you spoke about, if I'd assigned transaction from Coinbase. If that's good enough for me, then that's fine. It's business. But if I'm running WikiLeaks, that might not be good enough for me, right? I can't necessarily trust that they won't play with my numbers. So it's all about the flexibility and how you structure that.
Okay, thank you. I thought of a question, but I
would say that
another one.
This touches on ideas like reputation with oracles, which is going to be a challenge in the future.
Okay, well, now that you mentioned, and I know, for example, for Tellor or Chainlink, scalability might be also a related issue regarding the sources of information that you want for your Oracle. Is that a concern for you in Chainlink or Tellor right now?
So I can speak on regarding like Chainlink, for example. There's multiple areas of research. So one is just porting Chainlink to other chains. So having bridges between chains and going to layer 2 chains. There's multiple Chainlink partnerships along that. And also another current area of development I'm aware of is the use of bulletproofs, so that Oracle providers sign the data, multiple providers sign the data off chain, and then we only have one transaction that gets verified on chain. So currently, if you have 20 providers that are on an aggregator reference data contract, which this is the price of BTC, we each have to sign a transaction. But in the future, with a bulletproof, multiple people can sign the transaction through communication between the nodes off chain, and then only one transaction will be required to confirm the data update, and that enables significant cost savings, for example, because that's our main cost if you're paying Ethereum transaction, especially when gas prices soars. That becomes an issue. But in the long term, that there are innovations that are being worked on.
Yeah, I think from Tellor's perspective, scalability in the Oracle piece, it's almost second to scalability in the layer ones as well. We're building on top of Ethereum right now, and if you look at like current costs to just mine, like you could just mine every block on Ethereum for 150 grand and just not let Tellor push any blocks to the chain. So, and what we like to, and you could do that with Chainlink or any of them, and it's just the cost of doing business on Ethereum. But I think at the same time, what you want to build is sort of you don't want to build products that rely on really fast oracles. We push this point a lot, like especially Bitcoin or Ethereum. There's not finality in the chains themselves. Like you don't want to necessitate 10-second finality through your oracle or build a product that necessitates that if the chain itself isn't really finalized. So, we try and get people to build slower things that can sort of be more robust. Because, even if you guys remember Black Thursday, so, in March, whenever gas prices on Ethereum shot up and everything, basically the entire network froze for hours and hours, and you couldn't get any oracle pricing through, and it broke a whole lot of protocols. Because they sort of weren't built robustly. And I think it's just something, it's something that they haven't solved at the layer one piece either. If you look at like if Coinbase, if you get a deposit from Coinbase for Bitcoin, you wait an hour for a confirmation before you're allowed to do it. And if it's bigger, you wait even longer. It's still slow because there's not finality in it. So yeah, so it's sort of a problem, but it's not like a problem that's specific to oracles, is what I would say.
Nice. And well, now that I have you on the microphone, Nicholas, and the next question, we can start with you. How can we keep oracles as decentralized as possible? Is this a priority?
Yeah, so whenever I think decentralization, I always think of like censorship resistance. It's like, can somebody shut this thing down? I don't need to talk about enterprises with Joe or anything like that. It's, those are sort of a different issue as far as building oracles for enterprises. But, the thing you want to realize is that you're only like as decentralized or censorship resistant as your least decentralized point. So even if you build this very robust, derivatives network on top of Bitcoin, and then if you have a central party as your oracle, you're like not decentralized at all. And you see a lot of these issues, whether it's people building out stable coins or lending protocols on top of Ethereum, where they say they're completely decentralized. And then it's like, well, you guys run your oracle completely. Like you're not decentralized at all. You guys could just say that, the price of Ethereum is $10 million and throw it. And, for us, it really should be kind of the number one priority, because if you look at just seeing kind of where what's really gaining traction, for us, we think that things that are truly decentralized are what's going to take off. So, you look at like whether it's like an Ethereum versus an EOS, EOS sort of compromised on that, and it isn't sort of taken off because people want to build things that are censorship resistant. These are used for getting around laws, whether it's, Bitcoin for you're getting around KYC AML laws for digital transfers. And then you look at, Ethereum, you're getting around security laws for issuing tokens. And what can oracles enable? It's usually the things that are really going to take off on the blockchains are, you have to think about, okay, well, what laws are we going to break and what are we going to get around? And that's kind of what's exciting for me. So anyway, Joe.
Gordon? Sorry, that's funny. No, I would tend to agree. Decentralization in particular for censorship resistance, right? I mean, that's the biggest, the most, I guess, maybe the most novel or interesting part of it, right? And yet that decentralization can be leveraged to provide a better economy, to pull in more info. Like, let's say it is something you would see in Augur project, where it's I want as much info on this question before it's answered as possible, and I want an economy around that. So I want the best information earliest to profit the most, right? And that's when, really, really interesting. And so I think in order to do that, you have to provide a good structure and a good economy. And the hard part is, I imagine, especially for you guys really working purely in the Oracle space, is how do you possibly do that generically, right? I mean, that's extremely hard because, you think, okay, on any question, how can I make sure that the people who bring an answer, whether they're coders connected to an API or if there's some interface for it, how do I make sure that they're being honest, right? Generically, that's really hard. And, that is a reputation thing. And just to note, we think, and this is from a business perspective, that the vast majority of use cases that are possible that could actually leverage blockchain generically don't need absolute decentralization on most things. There are certain things they do, and there's certain, like if I need to prove to my vendor that I'm charging them the same and or paying out the same as I am for every other vendor, I do want that, ideally, on Ethereum or in some way that would be fully decentralized, that anybody could check any of the numbers and say, okay, I don't know who that is, but they're paid at the same rate that I am, right? That type of thing. So it's an interesting piece because I think that the most interesting by far of the applications will be really decentralized, but the most mundane and the most, I think the most potential is in the non-decentralized sides of it. That is feeding information from a trusted source that I need, and I maybe make an agreement with, okay, you guys are going to provide this information and there's some potential contractual liability even if you lie. So there is still the potential to apply incentives there, but it doesn't have to be decentralized. But at the same time, it's both, right? So
yeah, I agree. I think the centralization is a nice goal. In order to get to fully decentralized systems, I think we still have a road to transit. I think still in terms of governance, for the centralized systems in general, there's still a lot to do yet. That hasn't been fully solved. And also in terms of efficiency, right? The centralized systems sometimes work less efficiency, and certain use cases, as Joe mentioned, require they don't necessarily need fully decentralization. What they need, the use cases need reliable data on the blockchain, and that's all they need because in order to fulfill their tasks. And many use cases can work with the solutions we have today until we reach really truly decentralized solutions. So I think it's a nice goal, but at least in my case, if I'm developing something on the blockchain, or I don't see it as like the main priority, like the fully decentralized. But I understand that the most interesting use cases, of course, will require that decentralization.
Just mute yourself, Leo.
Sorry.
Hey.
Sorry, I muted you, Leo. This is
no problem. Currently, I think there's also the potential for like hybrid solutions. So, I would say, for example, especially regarding like price feeds, some people might want to use decentralized exchanges, so things like Uniswap, but that can sometimes expose you to certain risks. Like in Uniswap v1, there were certain vulnerabilities where someone with a flash loan could manipulate the price, and we had like a couple hacks with that. So I think that if I were to create a dApp today that was trying to get like the most decentralized price feed, I think the fastest solution would be to take a look at multiple data sources, multiple Oracle solutions, and then combine those, because the risk of multiple of them having critical failures at the same time is quite significantly lower than one of them having a problem. So that's what I think is also very interesting, where none of these might be perfect, but many of these have flaws in different areas. So combining multiple Oracle solutions can provide even more reliable price feed. This is in the case of price feed, which is kind of the main use case right now for Oracles.
Yeah, I think, to kind of pair it off what Leo was saying, like, I think using multiple oracles is definitely one way to kind of gain more security and a little bit more decentralization. But I would just kind of caution people whenever you're actually looking at Oracle protocols, like if the protocols themselves are saying like, well, we'll decentralize later, you see this strategy with a lot of blockchain projects where they're like, well, we'll just launch with a centralized Oracle now and then we'll decentralize it later. The problem is like, well, we'll launch now assuming that we have an instantaneous decentralized Oracle later, and then you build all your front ends and all your users and everything, they get used to a super fast Oracle, and we'll just be honest, like a crazy fast decentralized Oracle being built probably isn't going to happen anytime soon. And same with like, it's like if you just built a lending platform and just said, well, we'll just assume a really fast decentralized layer one. It's like, well, it might be a while. So yeah, you just have to be careful where you're decentralizing and where, be realistic about what it's actually going to look like in the future, or else it's just kind of a theater. You're just kind of pretending to be decentralized for some reason. So.
Thank you. Well, we are halfway with the questions. The next one is starting from Joe. What considerations change in the case of oracles in the enterprise, for the enterprise?
And this one is maybe a little bit, I'm going to at least answer a little broader from the fact that we learned a lot at Disney inside of a large enterprise with what is possible, and what a business will do, of course. And since then, I'm the same. I mean, our whole focus has been on protection of business data from the start, because at least I thought early on that most, if not all, enterprises will not accept and cannot accept putting their customer data on chain, right? There's some separation, and it's typically structural. And a lot of the projects out there from the beginning have tried to use math and encryption instead of structural architecture. And so, with oracles, it's much the same, that data protection is going to be key. There's no way that they can expose certain aspects. If it's a price point, or if it's something else, then they will consider it. If it's something that's already public and they just need a verified source or multiple verified sources. But the other pieces are actual integration. That it's already expensive enough to produce traditional software in an enterprise. It's so inefficient. It's very it's an ugly sausage making process that you end up with something that works, but behind the scenes everything's always falling apart. And when you throw in something like any of the existing public chains out there, it's almost a non-starter. There's no way you would want to pull that in. And the other, which you've already mentioned, is scalability and flexibility, right? And that's why everything we've done has been focused on those things. That how do we, in the interest of adoption of blockchain itself generically, and oracles are a big part of that, we need to answer, and we think we have answered, the data protection, integration questions, the scalability, the flexibility, right? And key, and the hardest part, by the way, is usually communications, because you solve the problem, and it's hard to cut through noise with an actual solution. Crypto Twitter as an example, it's hard to get information out there in a way that people can consume it. And it's even harder to get the right info out, because this stuff is so abstract to most people that you have to find ways to pretty much show it to them, to show them here it is in a case that makes sense in a way that is a unique application So an outside party thinks, okay, here's something I would love to do, but now it's impossible. And it's a beautiful thing to come in and say, look, here we're using blockchain, but you don't even have to care about that, and oracles, that it just happens. And it's all a part of that, because it's all, in the end, it's all about adoption. We have to be able to get all of these chains to a higher level of adoption before people will actually see what's possible, right? I mean, if it's, we're very early with all of this, but those things are key to it for an enterprise, and to get an enterprise to actually start adopting, even in the smallest way, some of this tech.
Anyone else wants to jump in, or? Okay, well.
Again, now what I'm thinking is, in the case of an enterprise, is a good example of how you can sacrifice a bit decentralization, because you have a working in permission, a bit of permission environments, more controlled, and you'll probably need to integrate your blockchain application with your legacy systems or any other type of application you have running in the organization. So probably in that case, you have even more flexibility to build maybe more custom-made solutions, which are more controlled, and in that case, you can get better efficiencies. So in that sense, you don't need to suffer a lot of the issues that we're suffering on the open, maybe more open space.
I think one thing that might also change with enterprise data is, even if you're using a public chain like Ethereum, the type of data that the enterprise Oracle will need will be much, wider than what we're currently offering. So currently, the main use case for most oracles has been price feeds that are leveraged by DeFi protocols. But an enterprise customer might want to use, like Joe mentioned, customer data, contracts, pricing info, and all of that is still really, we technically can get it done with Chainlink, but not really with the anonymity guarantees that private blockchains offer.
Thank you. Well, moving on to the next question, Julian. Okay. Could you explain for the non-technical which are the most typical types of oracles?
Yeah, I think as Leo mentioned, I think pricing feeds is one of the most typical ones. Basically, smart contracts allow you to transfer value. So basically, anything that's related to financial applications, prices, currency exchange rates, financial assets, whatever that is related to that is one of the most common ones. The other huge segment are events in the real world, and this is important for if you have any insurance application or escrow application or a dispute resolution application on the blockchain. You may need to react to certain things that happen in the external world, and you will probably need to build ad hoc or custom-made oracles to get those specific events that you want. And the other use cases are system integration in general. So if you need to connect to any API, a payment processor, a legacy backend system, whatever, you may also need an oracle to do that, and connecting to other blockchains. I would say that's another type of oracle, like oracles that are actually functioning as bridges between different blockchains. That would be another ones that come to my mind.
Yeah, I think one thing that's interesting is what are the oracle types of oracles that we haven't thought about yet, and applications that, in cryptography, there's kind of this rule of, don't roll your own crypto. And I think in oracles, we've seen the creation of certain standards that make it easy to kind of create your own custom oracle while still maintaining security. So, in the past, if you want to create a dApp that uses external data, you'd have to code up your own kind of oracle server that writes the data on chain. But now with these standards, people won't be, rolling their own oracle. They'll be using an existing protocol and just writing, a form of an adapter that fetches their own data that they need for their application. But most of the standard stuff that connects to the Ethereum blockchain will already be implemented. It will just be about fetching the data, and that will be written on chain in a standard way that dApp developers will learn to implement. And so this way we'll see many more applications that in the past would have needed custom solutions, but now can rely on a standard.
Can I add also, I think anything that would be for archival reasons, that is, if you, historical data, it could be weather data, it could be, rudimentary, simple stuff, but the fact that the Oracle is allowing that data to get on chain with some level of either reputation, proof, trust, something or other in place. But even in the worst case, and we've worked on projects where the data that comes in, it does come from an Oracle, and varying levels of decentralization depending, but that we in many cases we try to apply a bounty to it to be able to trust it, but in some cases the mere fact that this arbitrary data is on chain and has been on chain for 3 years now means something, because I can't go back and change that, and it depends upon what the data is, but the fact that it's the more atomic the data is, the better for our ability to trust it in the future, because you get enough data on there that all connects. It becomes really hard to tell an alternate story in the future, right? So I don't know how well, if you guys are looking at any of that right now. I'm sure a lot of the stuff you're looking about is for use right now. So I need data, most recent price, so I can take action right now. But we do actually do a lot of work around data getting on chain. You can look at Eternal. I mean, this is a very arbitrary point of it, but the fact that people will put tweets on chain that end up provable on the aggregate of Bitcoin, Ethereum Classic, and Binance, right? So you'd have to change all 4 chains in the future to go back and fake that this tweet wasn't really what this person said. And that's, how valuable is that? Who knows? In some cases, it's at least funny, but it's an interesting, and that's primarily what it's for, is to demonstrate this use case that we can get data on chain that can then be later proven, more than a screenshot, right? I mean, a screenshot I can Photoshop. It's easy. So that's an interesting piece. And we also, the other side of it is when you talk about when you talk about the oracles that haven't been considered, we do have something that was built in way back at Disney, and what amounts to a self oracle. So we have time-based self oracles, and they're not possible on Ethereum, right? But in Dragonchain, because we're hybrid, we can do some things where chains can become oracles to each other. You can do various things based on time. You can actually go out and pull in your own data on chain in Dragonchain, which is odd. So the chain itself can pull can go and get its own pricing data, but we still have, if you have any concern for trust, then you still have the same problems that you guys have with, okay, that part is kind of, we've left that solution to you guys, right? And would want to integrate with what you build to solve the cases where people really need to fix that problem.
Yeah, if I can kind of chime in too, we were talking about kind of Oracle use cases beyond the traditional ones. The first kind of foray into research that we're doing with the Ethereum Foundation was actually using oracles to bridge different chains together. So, just basically passing block headers from Bitcoin on chain, or whether it was different Ethereum chains, you could just pass block headers back and forth, and then you can verify different things that happened on other chains. And, whenever that's technically an oracle, that's doing that as well. So, I think in the future we'll start to see some more of that, and kind of like Joe was saying, the next big piece for oracles, I would say, would be also like getting data from one chain to another, or just getting data off chain in general. So now you have this like valid ownership. Well, how do you sort of even read from the chain in a trustless manner, whether it's hardware or something like that? we've talked about the idea, you could have like you could have a drone, for instance, that's controlled by a DAO on Ethereum, and you would have something pass messages back and forth, and that would be an oracle. So, or you just have it run a node or something. There's different mechanisms for having to transfer between chains and between different pieces. And I think those will be the next kind of path for oracles. Once you just realize how do you validate any sort of data, and then we'll go from there.
Thank you. Well, we are running out of time, so I'll try to speed this up, or at least I'll give to you two questions. One of those we already covered a bit, which are the use cases you see the most potential for blockchain oracles? And the second one is which are the main drawbacks when dealing with oracles? And Leo, if you want, you can start. You can choose which one you want to put focus on. You are muted. Let me unmute you.
Try not to repeat myself, so maybe I'll focus on like some of the drawbacks. I mean, it really depends on each protocol, like I mentioned. So, I mentioned if you use an on-chain, I mean, I don't know if you'd call that an oracle, but if you use an on-chain DEX, there might be risks of manipulation depending on, the smart contract with, things like flash loans. Though I think Uniswap V2 is much improved on that with for the price feeds. But for something like Chainlink, for example, some of the drawbacks I've already mentioned, like the API, because at the end of the day, your oracle is only as strong as its weakest link. And if the API goes down, well, that's kind of a problem. Then also governance is also critical. So who is paying the oracle? So right now, Chainlink has certainly improved on the funding mechanism, because we've had certain dApps come on board and sponsored certain data feeds, so that Chainlink isn't the only one paying for the oracle, the reference data contracts. But in the future, hopefully, we're going to see forms of staking, which create penalty deposits, so that if an oracle misbehaves, they will lose their deposit, and also enables token holders to stake an oracle and share revenue, and have a long-term commitment to the data. So a long-term commitment that over the next over the next 1,000 blocks, for example, we will always update the feed, versus the current system where it's mostly based on if you trigger a request, we will respond to it, but nothing guarantees that we will. Though currently, obviously, it's in our incentive to do so because we get paid and it improves our long-term reputation. So certainly that's at least Chainlink specific. So improvements on governance and having penalty and staking.
Yeah, I would add in terms of draws. I think the cost is something that needs to be improved a bit. I think the pricing reference contracts and that architecture of having like one contract that is consumed by everybody and can allow you to subsidize sort of the cost. But otherwise, I think it is a drawback of oracles are quite expensive. You need to write every transaction, mainly if you implement your own oracle. Also in terms of performance, but this is kind of related to also the blockchain itself. I think as Nick mentioned, like if the blockchain settles every certain time, it's very difficult to have oracles, or it doesn't make a lot of sense to have oracles that settle before that. But it is true that there is a limitation there in general in the technology. And another one that I think it's maybe not that critical, but I think that Leo is working a bit on that, is there is no like I would say marketplaces or directories where you can get all this access to all the different oracles and allows different applications to basically share, to basically start connecting the different smart contracts that bring data from the external world, and have sort of that place where you can go and say, okay, what is the information? Because eventually you want to get to some sort of a big network, right? I imagine it's sort of like the internet where you can get all this information and you really know that you can trust it and it's working. And so that would be nice to see more integrations and more visibility to what's available. But I know that Leo is working on that with feeds.link.
Yeah, I can speak to that real quickly. So feeds.link is basically just a platform where you can view Oracle data feeds. I mean, it's still in development right now. Initially, we launched with the Chainlink reference contracts, But obviously, Chainlink has their own website also with their reference contracts. But the long-term vision was to add other protocols. So Tellor is going to be on board in a couple days, I think. And also we have we're planning to add. We also added like the MakerDAO, for example, oracles that they use. Those are to a certain degree centralized. It depends, but just to illustrate how our DApps, what oracles are the current existing DApps using, for example, and what are the risks and historical performance of those oracles, so that we provide a platform to show all that the market offers currently.
Yeah, and so I can plug here. So we've been working for a while on an EIP. So EIP 2362, basically we want an Oracle standard on Ethereum for reading different values. That's just, it's been one of the issues in the space as far as just if you are a project and you want to integrate an Oracle, now you have to write basically completely separate adapters for every single Oracle contract. And it's quite a learning curve. And, so if we're going to have an eventual, aggregator of Oracle contracts, you're going to need some sort of standard. And that's what we've been working on. So there's a current EIP out there. We're hoping to get it finalized here soon and get some people to start implementing it. So maybe you can go talk to your guys over at Chainlink and push them a little bit harder than we can. So.
Thank you, Nicholas. We are 10 minutes in the panel. So if you want, now it's time for your final thoughts and conclusions. We can start. Julian, do you want to start?
Yeah, I think we covered a lot of things. I think this is, as I mentioned, a space that still needs a lot that needs to be developed, let's say, in this space. But I think it's really exciting. I think, as we mentioned at the beginning, oracles are going to be the enabler of the real use cases that really make an impact on our lives. I mean, like connecting. Today we have these great applications, mainly on the DeFi space, that are being built, and all this economy that is being built. But I think there's still a long way till we connect this with the real world, and this means also connecting devices. I'm thinking Internet of Things that we can connect smart contracts to the actual world that we interact every day. I think that's something that will be very interesting to see in the future, how we can really fulfill like these visions, like the car that has a wallet and is connected to your private key, and you can, if you sell it, that gets transferred through the blockchain, and all that all those use cases that we talk like, okay, this can be certainly built, but there's still some way until we see it realized. But yeah, so thanks for the space, and it's very nice to participate in this kind of panels.
Thank you, Juli. And do you want to continue?
Sure. I would say, I mean, about the subject itself. We've at least, I mean, I believe that businesses or projects, need to kind of step back and think about the real requirements for what they're building. Not be dogmatic. And to figure out what that right model is, where do you need to apply? Because decentralization is complex enough that, you want to make sure you focus it where you need it, right? Don't try to apply it where it's not necessary, where people don't necessarily want it, where business doesn't necessarily need it. And the beauty then is that you have a mix of tech that you can apply, and you need a good platform for it, and that's a lot of what we're trying to focus on. We'd love to integrate with as many projects as possible and interop with as many chains as possible. And in the end, it's all about adoption and all about getting the technology in place. Solving the problems and getting it out there, getting it actually used. So that's what we're all about. So.
Hey, Joe. Leo, you can continue now.
Yeah. Final thoughts. Well, I really agree with what Julian said about like price feeds and how currently everyone's using price feeds, but we might see other data. And currently the focus has been a lot on DeFi, but I'm really excited about, even though we mostly run price feed right now, I'm really excited about the next wave of dApps that are going to be coming online. They're going to be using layer 2 for scalability, oracles for their external data, and meta transactions to get their users to have a feelless experience. So I'm really excited for the basically no compromise dApp. The dApp that's decentralized but feels like traditional web experience. And I don't think we're going to see that on the main chain, but we'll likely see that on maybe side chains or other protocols. And combined with oracles, that's going to create really interesting use cases that we really haven't seen yet. And that's my final thoughts. And I encourage any dApp developers to look into all of these protocols to fit their data needs, because they're definitely better than rolling your own solution. That way you can focus on your main business of dApp development and let us do the data.
Thank you, Leo. And now, Nick, we can conclude with your final thoughts.
Sure. First off, thanks for having me. Great to be part of this very prestigious panel. And no, I think just kind of echoing what Leo and the others said, it's, oracles are just such an important part of the space. They're starting to make up more and more a part of DeFi, and they're backing really just large amounts of value. And I hope that users will kind of look into what their oracle is, where the security features are, and what they are, and kind of where the money is actually at risk, because these oracles hold a lot of value already, and a lot of people don't really know even how they work. So, if you're building on them, make sure that before you even start building your project, you look into different oracles and you figure out what is kind of possible. And then if you're already using one of these protocols, make sure you ask them about their oracles, and make sure you realize that, figure out whether or not they're as decentralized as they say they are. But yeah, thanks for having me, and it was fun.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Well, if you want, we have 4 minutes left. If you want to add something, now it's the time. If not, thank you very much for joining this RIF Oracles Expert Panel. It's been a blast, so thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks. You don't have any final thoughts, Raúl?
Well, I do have. Well, I studied all of your Oracle's protocols, so yeah, I do have more technical questions, but I don't think it's the space. We don't have time to discuss them. But yeah, I'm very curious about what, especially Chainlink and basically all of you have in your roadmaps. I do have more connection with Chainlink because it was the first one that I studied. I also know Dragonchain because I was in the presentation when Dragonchain was presented at IBM, so I remember that very nice. So yeah, well, I have very positive thoughts for all the projects. So yeah, thank you for joining.
Wow, thank you.